our background is we started off life as architectural lighting designers. So I came from engineering years ago, and I did a PhD in lighting at the School of Architecture in Liverpool. And then I went into commercial lighting design. I worked in a lighting design practice. I never did any engineering right from the start. I just did lighting design until we set up Light Collective 5 or 6 years ago. And Sharon came from an arts background.
I did a theatre degree, so I did stage lighting and stage electrics. So we always have this joke that kind of like I'm the creative one and Martin's
Which is completely not true.
But we've known each other a long time. We used to work for an organisation called the PLDA, which was the Professional Lighting Design Association, that doesn't exist anymore. And it was sort of set up to promote lighting design in Europe and talk about our profession and what we do and sort of spread the word about it. We found out that we had a sort of, we were good at causing trouble when we worked together, and that kind of inspired us to set up our own company. In this film, they made lots and lots of rules about how to survive being killed by zombies. And we decided if we were going to set up a lighting consultancy, we wanted to be a little bit different. We didn't want to work in the way we'd worked, the 12 years previously in a sort of traditional consultancy. So we set ourselves some rules. They're very different, obviously, than zombie rules. And these were our rules.
So I won't read them all out to you. You can read them all yourselves. But we also read a book at the time, a book called Rework. So if you're thinking of setting up your own company, I really recommend this book. It's called Rework. And it's all about how being a big, massive company, it actually isn't necessarily the best thing. You can be a small company and you can be as ambitious and as dynamic and even more dynamic as a small company as you can as a big company. And in fact, what it said is there's so many advantages of being a small company and staying a small company that they're surprised more people don't do it. So we sort of took that on board.
For example, there's a chapter that says meetings are toxic. So the idea is that in any meeting where there's more than 3 people, you're never really going to achieve anything or never get any decisions made. Another one of our favourite ones was work a little bit like a drug dealer. So give a little bit away for free to your clients and then they will come back for more. So there's all these sort of ideas
it's a really good book,
that are kind of interesting. So I think we neglected to say that Light Collective is just the 2 of us.
Absolutely. And we've been the 2 of us for 6 years. And we started off thinking, okay, we should get an office, we should get some staff. And then we sort of thought, well, actually, hold on a minute. If we have an office, we travel so much we'd never be in it. So Sharon lives in London, I live in Birmingham, and all of our work's on the cloud. It always has been for the last 6 years. And we have no physical office. We found that we don't need it. We can work wherever we are. We've sat in hotels in Mexico and worked. We've been chased off a balcony by monkeys in Kenya once when we were doing our books. It's just we've worked in some amazing places.
Okay, so back to our silly rules that sort of have a point. We try and make sure that the projects we do kind of follow these things, and we'll give you some examples. So, always be evangelical about light. Whenever we get the opportunity, so we're invited here to speak or anywhere to speak, we'll try and go. For us, it's really important to talk about light not only to people that are interested in following it as a career or working with it in some way, but to the general public. I mean, to everybody, small children, old ladies, everybody, because it's something that's so ingrained in humanity and it's so important to how everyone lives their lives. For us, it's very important to spread the message sort of as far as possible. The image on the screen is from an exhibition we curated this year in Paris. We were invited to put together an exhibition for the International Year of Light, and we used it as an opportunity to bring together 12 sort of different pieces, art pieces from international artists, but more importantly to tell a very clear story to the general public that we're visiting about, I've forgotten his name.
Richard Kelly.
Richard Kelly.
The most famous lighting
designer. The most
designer.
famous lighting designer ever. I forgot his name temporarily there. Have you all heard of him?
Yes.
Yes, all right, there's a few. So he's sort of generally supposed to be the forefather of lighting design in America, worked with lots of, hugely famous architects, and developed a language about light. There's a very famous phrase that he used, which describes the sort of three properties of light being the play of brilliance, focal glow, and
ambient
luminescence. So we shaped the exhibition around the idea of play of brilliance. So it's this incredible, beautiful old Parisian space, and what we wanted to do for all of the pieces to sort of bring play of brilliance describes bringing sparkle or bringing life and vivacity to a space, and that's what one of the things light can do. So the exhibition was about that, and with the thought behind it that we could sort of use that message and talk to the public that came to it.
It was on for 3 months right in the centre of Paris in a privately owned gallery. The piece in the foreground is by a Berlin-based company called White Void. They're very much into kinetic light in terms of the light being dynamic, but also the piece being dynamic. So they actually, each of those rings is controlled in 3D space by the 3 straps you see, so that it goes up and down, it changes colour, it changes angle. And then in the back there's a piece called Disco Disco, which is a modern interpretation of a disco ball by a London-based studio called Haberdashery. So our sort of second rule is to innovate, to try and do something different. And one of the first projects we worked on together, a company came to us, a company called Zaccato, who make LED modules. They came to us about 5 years ago and said, right, we're just going to launch this product onto the market. We want to talk to lighting designers, we want to engage them, we're going to have a seminar and then take them to a restaurant. What do you think? And we said, well, that's rubbish. Because basically people will stand in a room and listen to a PowerPoint like this, and they'll be slightly engaged maybe, and then you'll take them to a restaurant under somebody else's light. So we persuaded them to let us create a pop-up restaurant in a derelict building. It was quite like this, sort of, but without the sculptures. It was just an empty shed of a warehouse, an old furniture warehouse. And we lit it with their LED modules. And their LED module is, to us as lighting designers, we looked at it and said, well, it's like tungsten. It's so warm and the colours were so rich and accurate. And we created a 7-course meal where each course was a different colour of the spectrum. So we made a pop-up restaurant, and then it was 7 courses. So people eating their dinner underneath this incredibly warm, rich light, for every course they would get to see a different colour of the spectrum. So it really sort of sent that message home in their head, and they had a great time, and so did we, to be honest. And then the event toured. We've done it in 10 different countries so far.
Not Denmark, though.
Not Denmark.
Not Denmark. Our third rule, inspire. I think they kind of all overlap a little bit, but this idea that you can sort of get as many people as possible sort of working with light, or using their knowledge about light to inspire other people. And we were lucky, again, we have all these great opportunities.
We do.
Concorde, a UK-French lighting company, again, they wanted to promote a particular product. And again, their idea was a very sort of dull, let's go and show some designers our spotlight and see what they think. So there's better ways of doing this. And so we convinced them to spend quite a lot of money on this project, not for our sake, but so that we could involve as many lighting designers internationally as possible. And we created a competition called One Beam of Light, and we invited people all over the world to submit an image using a single beam of light. And they could do whatever they wanted to the beam, so they could modulate it or colour it or reflect it or use props, do whatever they wanted, but we just wanted this one image. And we ended up having, I think, about 400 entries from all over, lots of different countries. And there was a jury, and they picked the top 30, which resulted in this exhibition. One of the main reasons for doing this, and this was actually shown in a public gallery in London, is to be able to have the opportunity then to explain to people what we do and how we do it. So, all right, it's a lovely picture, but this one's reflection, something else is diffusion, or something else is a projection. But it gave us the opportunity to be able to talk about properties of light, how we use them, and what we use them for.
Okay, we also like to try and engage people in what we do, so it's not enough for us to sort of talk to them and tell them and inspire them.
We have to make them do something.
We actually want to get them hands-on as well. This is one of the things that we're going to talk to you in a lot of detail about a bit more further down this presentation. It's a thing called guerrilla lighting. So it's about taking people, going out on the street and lighting stuff up. And that's what we've been doing it since 2007. So we're going to talk to you more about that later, because we believe that there's a plan for you to do one.
These are all people lighting up.
They're Swedish people, aren't they?
They are Swedish people, in fact. Educate. I mean, educate sounds a bit sort of pretentious, but we kind of mean that education can be on all different sort of levels. And with the sort of technology shift that's happened in lighting and the move towards LEDs, there's a lot of myths attached to LEDs and how they work and what complicated they are. So we, with this in mind, we set up a series of workshops called Make Some Lights, and it was kind of very much exactly what it says, come and make some lights. With the idea that lots of different designers could come along and using a small tin, a metal tin, and an LED, a bit of soldering, a bit of wiring, make their own torch. And it's evolved into something a bit bigger, so there's now a kind of competition that happens. Yeah. We're not involved in it anymore, but it's grown. So every year in the UK, people now make
all the London studios have a competition to take a box full of LEDs and wires and bits of metal and make the best light. So last year someone adapted a camera. It's really, the scale of it has gone through the roof. It's been really good.
But there's such a movement in sort of like maker stuff and anyway in all sorts of different other areas. It's about time it kind of came to lighting, really.
And this, a lot of the things we do, again, they just happen, or we make them happen. Or like in this instance, somebody came to us with an idea and said, look, I'm really interested in telling people how to make lights and giving them a bit more education about circuit boards. Can you help me with an idea to do that? And we helped them make this idea happen and got them a sponsor for it.
So if anyone's got a really good idea,
and they want we can help you make it work.
We might be able to help you.
And then we sort of also were inspired by that principle and took it on ourselves, and we went to Singapore and we encouraged...
Well, we didn't just go to Singapore. They invited us.
We went to the I Like Marina Bay Light Festival in Singapore, and they invited us to work with 250 school children. And we taught each of them how to wire up an LED to a little wooden box, and then we taught them how to make a custom screen to go on the front. So each of these 250 kids made one of these little boxes, and we stacked them all together in a big installation which was left as part of the Light Festival for 3 weeks. And then at the end of it, they all got their boxes and took them home with them as well. So they made something, they made a piece in a Light Festival, and then they took it away, so it was completely sort of a contained project that was owned by these school children in Singapore, which is sort of, we really like the principle of that, because quite often Light Festivals are great, but it's in Singapore and somebody comes from America and they plonk a piece down and people look at it and then it goes, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with the place. Whereas to this enabled us to sort of, actually, it was almost nothing to do with us, it was more to do with the kids who made it.
This is another guerrilla lighting image. We would never advocate lighting a block of flats like this, but it's it's temporary and it was for fun. This rule, this idea about sharing knowledge. We're part of an international group called the Social Light Movement, and there's six of us. We're from the UK. There's a lady from Belgium, an Italian lady, and 2 Swedish designers. And it came about a good few years ago, based on the idea that all the good lighting is in city centres. So all the money that cities spend tends to be on the important buildings, cathedrals, nice squares, that kind of thing. And yet you have a periphery in every city, which is normally where people live, that tends to have lighting that is nowhere near as good.
Utility.
It's very basic. It's not attractive. And we like the idea of sort of being able to go into these environments and coming up with ways of improving them, but particularly just sort of cheap ways, not expensive ways of doing it. And the social light movement started doing a series of workshops in different countries where we would invite groups of students to come and spend a week in essentially a housing estate or somewhere like that and work on different ideas for improving the area with light. And most of them have happened in conjunction with, say, the owners of the estate. So this is a picture from Ulster in Sweden. And the owners of the people of the housing corporation were very much involved. They allowed us to be there, they came along, they introduced us to all the different residents, and then at the end they came along and saw all the different ideas that happened in the workshop, and they liked them so much that they have actually implemented some of them. But they were very basic things. They were things about wayfinding, or things about just making things just a bit more fun or a bit less utilitarian.
Giving the people who live there something to be proud of, so that they were a bit more engaged in their own environment. So then at the other end of the spectrum, from social lighting, we're also looking at daylight. Daylight is something that we think, as lighting designers, as somebody who works with light, you have a responsibility to know about daylight, to talk about it in conversations with architects. I found particularly over the years I've worked in a large architectural practice in the UK, that the amount architects knew about daylight had dropped off dramatically. I don't think it's quite the same in Denmark, because obviously you've got an incredible daylight tradition and a lot of your modern buildings are really well daylit. But particularly in the UK, in the sort of 80s and 90s, daylight was a forgotten art. It just became such a sort of minor part of designing a building. The facade was there to make the building look cool. The windows were like little decorative elements that looked nice at night. It was nothing to do with getting daylight and making a nice space for people. So we try to sort of promote daylight. It's one of the things we do. We're trying to, at the moment, we're in the process of organising a daylight festival in Mexico City with a Mexican...
We can't do it in the UK.
Yes, just wouldn't work.
Just don't have the...
But with a Mexican lighting designer, so we can sort of start that conversation going there.
And another thing is this series of postcards that we've just completed for Mondo Art magazine. They came, it's an international magazine, I'm sure some of you will have seen it.
Does anybody know Mondo Art?
Yes.
Yes.
So we have a few hands. But we convinced a company to print these individually numbered series of cards. And they're all an iconic building around the world that has amazing daylight. And we wanted to pick ones we'd actually visited rather than just looking at photos and that looks good. So we picked our favourites and we convinced them to give away 12,000 of each of them in each magazine. So there was an opportunity in every edition of the magazine that the cards came out with that we could sort of talk about daylight and how stunning it is and how we should all be working with it.
And then the flip side of daylight, obviously, is darkness. Again, lots of the conversations in lighting design over the years are never about darkness. It was always about light. There's a light pollution lobby that doesn't really engage much with the lighting design lobby. And so one of the things we wanted to do was try and sort of start those conversations going. And at the same time, a friend of ours, a lighting designer in Chile, approached us and said that she wanted to do something like that as well. Could we work with her? So we set up an event in Chile in the Atacama Desert, which is the sort of darkest sky in the world. And it was a 2-day conference. And what we did is we brought in leading lighting designers, astronomers, light and health experts, physicists, philosophers, light pollution experts, and basically
made them talk to each other.
Got them there and got them all to tell their side of the story. And there was lots of empathy between them. So, and we think through sort of working together like that, that's the way things will change.
Okay, so last of all, what we were going to say is use that as an example of challenging convention. This actually was in Copenhagen 2 years ago at PLDC, the conference that happens every 2 years for lighting design. And this was an opportunity to get people to understand the way a new particular LED source worked, lighting source. So we invited everyone to come along, put on white overalls and a mask, and literally throw coloured paint at each other so that they could look
Underneath
at
this vibrant,
the colour
extra vibrant light source.
Yeah, underneath the light source. So I hope we've been suitably weird enough in giving you some examples of what we do.
Oh.
We thought it was more fun to talk about them than to talk about the lighting design projects, but we do them as well.
We do a bit of lighting design as well,
but we're not
when
going to
we
talk
can't
about
avoid
that.
it. But so what I said at the start, what we're going to talk about today is narratives through light, but particularly we're going to talk about light and urban intervention. So to us, urban intervention is a really it's something that we find really quite interesting. The fact that people are getting their message and taking out and telling it to people, because it's got a great parallel with what we like to do. We want to go out and talk to people about light. People who wouldn't necessarily come across anything about light, wouldn't even think about light, but would have this innate appreciation and understanding and engagement with light. So, I mean, urban intervention, you can sort of define it, I guess, or the best definition I've seen is private works in public spaces. So it's about artists going out and actually creating something in a public space that changes the perception of that space, or makes it better, or makes a point about something. So we're going to talk to you about that, and we're going to sort of talk about not about light, but then we're going to go in and talk about light.
So this is my wall in London. I'm really enjoying being able to put it in a lecture, because until recently it was just a red brick wall and it didn't look like that. And then there was a graffiti festival in my area in London, and they were looking for spaces, and I volunteered, I don't know whether stupidly or not, but I volunteered my wall. I mean, it's sort of very basic form, urban intervention, graffiti, which is something we all know and understand and we're all very sort of familiar with. It can be used in terms of decoration or for a sort of political message, or sometimes just lack of respect. I mean, at the moment, now, sadly, someone has come along and sprayed something over this, just like that. So things evolve in urban spaces. We also like this artist, this guy, Bruce Curtis, because he does something he calls reverse graffiti. So he goes and finds very dirty places, and then he jet washes graffiti into them.
This next one, now this really is sort of urban intervention. So, and I'm sure you've probably all seen this. Again, it was in a subway in Stockholm, Sweden, I think.
There's a lot of Sweden in this.
I know,
picture.
Sweden's the wrong country. We're talking about Swedish people. So what they did is they went into the subway and they changed the staircase into an interactive keyboard. Really sort of like quite a relatively simple intervention, but the purpose of doing it was to see if they could change people's physical behaviour.
Just really, really simple, silly things. And I think once your eyes are open to this and you walk around a city, there are so many. I can't believe how many.
Yeah.
It's not just London, but little tiny things.
Sometimes some of them are with light as well. I mean, that one was, I can't remember where I spotted that now, but just walking along and somebody just stuck a stencil on the pedestrian crossing. It was in France. But people are just mixing up with light and making things different. And unless you're looking, you don't really see them.
So we also like this artist. He calls his work Urban Shadows. And so he literally paints round the shadow that would be there by day so that it's visible at night. I think it's really cool. It sort of shows at night time, it gives you the opportunity to see two things at once. It's sort of slightly confusing and a bit surprising when you look at it.
Then this next one is what's sort of called circumstantial shadows. So obviously they've spotted that shadow and thought, if I paint a little spaceship above that, it's going to look like a beam of light's coming out of that spaceship at 10 o'clock on Thursday the 14th of June. It'll work once and then it'll almost work for a lot of other times. But they've just sort of taken that bit of their environment and it's inspired them to create something.
Based on sort of daylight principles of Egyptian architecture. It's brilliant. As I say, there are so many examples we could sort of go on for hours. And there are people doing very small things like the traffic lights, or there are artists doing sort of much bigger projects. We like this artist. He's a Scottish artist. He takes over all the advertising boards that are around a particular city, and he puts his poetry on them. So it literally uses a light source that's already existing. It's normally quite bright, it's normally got a very boring message, I don't know, toothpaste or shampoo, and puts his poetry on the top.
So, I mean, light it's quite a popular medium for urban intervention because of this way it inspires people, engages people, and it's seemingly relatively simple to change in places, but everybody seems to be drawn to light and people seem to always want to handle it. So that's something that inspires us and encourages us to engage people.
This is something we tried, which was again in Singapore, and Singapore's kind of famous for being a city where you're not allowed to do anything. Chewing gum's banned, graffiti is banned, for example. So we thought we were working with teenagers, and we thought if we could offer them a way to make temporary graffiti using light, they wouldn't be breaking any rules, but they might actually have some fun with it.
Yeah.
So this is the idea of making graffiti using a mirror with a stencil on it, a cut-out stencil, and just a torch. We originally experimented with doing it with daylight, and there's lots of silly pictures of me walking around London, sort of shining mirrors on people and other facts. But it works a lot better with a sort of focused LED beam.
And sometimes we think these interventions, they're about making you stop and think, or creating what we call like a double take moment. So you'd walk past this and then you'd probably look back and then think, actually that's lit, how can that be lit? It's one of those things where initially you'd think it was a fallen over lamppost, and then you'd look back and you'd say, oh. And that's what it is to us. It's about making people think and take a check and take a pause in their environment. This guy's Chris King Turner. This is actually called Lay Down and Shine, this work. And his motto is subverting the everyday.
This is a Spanish group called Luz Interrupters, and you might have heard of them because they're very, very active. All of the sort of interventions they do are sort of politically motivated in some way. So they might be about waste or police action or something in Spain. But this one, in Madrid, it's prohibited to touch public sculptures in the city. You're not supposed to touch them. So they figured if they put some nipples on them with an LED inside, they might encourage people to come up and squeeze them, which they did. So
they were making a point about how strange it is to have these things in an urban environment and people not be allowed to interact with them. Then the next artist that we put in isn't sort of a sort of urban intervention in the way Luz Interrupters is with their sort of guerrilla action. But it's someone that we met in Copenhagen about 8 years ago, a lady called Hannelise Thompson, and we were sort of really bowled over by the way she worked in an urban environment, so we thought we'd put it in just to give you guys a bit of information about it. She goes into communities and she goes into the houses in those communities and she speaks to people and photographs them, and she finds out their story and what sort of motivates them. And normally these sort of streets, nobody knows who lives in any of the houses. People go in at night, they close their doors, and that's it, that's the end of the day. And so what she did was she took simple slide projectors and she projected the photographs she'd taken of the people who were inside the house on the outside, and she sort of really tried to capture the essence of the people that did this. And this went incredibly well, and she also did a piece in New York where it was called the Homeless People of New York Wish You Merry Christmas. And it was 2 billboards opposite each other on a square in New York, disused land. And she just had photographs of homeless people wishing everybody Merry Christmas. It was really, again, it's making the unseen seen in many ways. But they don't have to be complex. This is
well, we've got a simple one and a complex one. So.
This one's called a simple spotlight. So what these guys did is they persuaded the street lighting engineers, actually in Kansas, but it was a Scottish group. I don't know, they ended up in Kansas. But
how did we end up in Romania?
Good point. They persuaded the street lighting engineers to turn off a section of street lights, and they put in a single theatre spotlight, and then they sat back and waited to see what would happen. So all of this you're seeing, none of it was scripted, none of it was invited. They just left the spotlight there, and people turned up, and they turned up and performed, or they just performed as they walked through it. It was just this single patch of light which has this sort of association in people's head with theatre and performance, changed people's behaviour.
Yeah, no one came and had a picnic there, like Olafur Eliasson's son. People picnicked under the sun, but here they performed. So this next example is a very complex one. It's our last example. This is on a massive scale. It's Cinnamon Studios based in London. They created a giant UFO, and they attached it to the bottom of a helicopter. They covered it in lots of colour-changing LEDs. And the first time they flew it was over Copacabana Beach in Rio. Then they flew it over
Prague or Warsaw.
Poland, somewhere in Poland.
Warsaw.
And it also flew in London. And every time it's flown, it's sort of sparked all this internet controversy with people sort of looking up
conspiracy theory
and wondering if it was real. Or,
you can see the helicopter hovering above it, but people still thought it was real, didn't they? It was like, no, yeah, that helicopter's following it. No.
But yeah, the point being, look what we can do with light. Inspired by all of these kinds of things, or all these really cool sort of urban interventions happening all over the world, we wanted our own one. And I don't know if it's as good as the Tiger or not, but so anyway, we started something called Guerilla Lighting.
So we started this in 2007, and it was our sort of basically our take on urban intervention, but also our way of communicating about light and light in an urban environment. Sorry, I thought you were going to say something there.
No, I was going to say something. I was going to say that guerrilla lighting works really well in the UK.
Yeah,
but
as a title.
We've been to lots of different countries where it's not such a great word. We actually did a lecture in Chile where we were banned from using the word, so we had to sort of creatively talk around it. But as a sort of light activism, it works very well. But we're kind of aware it's got some more serious connotations.
So we developed it as an idea, basically as a war on bad lighting, so that we could show people, we could go into cities and create conversations about light and talk about why this sort of lighting shouldn't be allowed, why there should be restrictions, why professional people or trained people should design lighting. So we sort of tried to use this as a platform to make lots of points about light and lighting design and the use of light in the urban environment. And also just to start conversations going.
Sometimes we get in trouble. Most of the time these days, I think we have permission to light sites, but in the beginning there was a lot. It was more guerrilla.
It was very guerrilla in the beginning.
So there were a lot of situations. I mean, that's on the south bank on the river in London, and you're not even allowed to take photos there anymore. But we wanted to come up with an idea that was kind of cheap and quick and easy. So how do you light big buildings in a quick, easy, cheap way? And that led us to this idea of involving big groups of people, not necessarily lighting professionals, but people in the street, and using torches. So this image we've called it Anuka's mum, this slide, because Anuka Larsson is a designer in Finland, and until her mum came on a guerrilla lighting event, she didn't really understand what her daughter did as a job. So on a very primary level, it worked for Anuka's mum. But it tends to work for everybody that participates. By the end of an event, they've got some sort of understanding of how you light a building, even very basically.
And we've done this in sort of loads of different countries around the world, loads of different cities in England, and the level of people that we've had participate varies incredibly in a really positive, incredible way, like from Anuka's mom to really old grannies in Finland to young children to men in suits in sort of London and Birmingham. Like literally you can engage such a wide variety of people doing this, and we really
all we're asking them to do is come with us for an hour and a half with a torch, and we'll tell you where to stand, and then we'll show you at the end what you've created. So it's not a big ask,
but we always promise them a beer at the end, don't we? That's a key part of our message. So all the thinly veiled excuse for a party. Yeah. So what we do is we sort of plan these events. We call them guerrilla lighting. We plan them like a mission. And what we do is one night we aim to light up 4 or 5 different buildings, and we plan a route around these buildings that will literally take you about 20 minutes, half an hour to walk if you didn't stop and light up a building every time. And the types of buildings we pick are really critical to the success of this mission, because you're using very low-tech,
crap,
rubbish lighting equipment, and so you have to pick the right building, and it has to be sort of quite dark when it's unlit, so you can show a big transformation. So you'd think like a city would have any amount of places that would work, but it really does take a lot of practice to pick the right buildings.
So we try and, like Martin says, we plan them. And we try and sort of approach the buildings as if we were doing proper lighting design. I mean, Guerilla lighting sort of spiraled off from us, so there are lots and lots of events that have happened without us, we're not involved in at all, which is fine, we wanted that. But there are some sort of principles we ask that people follow, and that is, you know, primarily that you don't just turn up and shine torches at a building, because then you're missing the point, but that you plan beforehand. So, what is this?
That's in Glasgow.
So, in this case, they did some planning on, you know, how it would be lit if it was lit with permanent equipment, if it was a permanent installation rather than temporary.
And then that sort of planning and mock-up and design is translated into a sheet. So we say we go out with 50 people and we divide them up into 5 teams of 10, and we work out what equipment each person in that team needs, where that person has to stand on each different installation. So it looks really spontaneous. If you're stood there, it looks like 50 people walk up to a building, move around, stand in the right position and turn a torch on. But it isn't. It's all sort of been planned out in advance, and it's sort of...
If only
it was that spontaneous. But the idea is to make it look spontaneous. So the people who are doing it, the people who are sort of holding the torches, they know nothing about it. They turn up on the night and they shine their torches and they get told where to stand. And to them it is quite spontaneous as well.
So we're saying that we use this sort of very simple and cheap equipment. These big yellow torches, it's kind of called a yellow because when you see 50 people walking out with a big yellow torch, it gets a lot of attention. But they're very high powered. They're tungsten, and they have like a 20-minute lifespan. So we kind of go to one building, we light it, and then we go to the next one, and we have to do it quite fast, otherwise they run out. So there's sort of these constraints. We've recently started sort of testing some LED torches. Yeah. They're nowhere near as good in terms of brightness or colour. So it's been quite interesting that we always go back to the tungsten ones. I can't believe anyone in the lighting world is using tungsten.
As much tungsten as we are, yeah. I know. So
they're rechargeable.
They are rechargeable, and we also use sort of some other little fittings like the Osram .it, so those little fittings doing the lines, blades of light. They were from Philips years ago that their sales reps used to bring round when LEDs first came out to show their LED line product, and they were little battery powered things, and we borrowed them and never gave them back.
Basically anything that can be carried.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. If people can carry it with us, then we use it. So the mission starts off like a proper sort of mission with a briefing. So when everyone arrives, in general, people don't actually have a clue what they're about to go and do, and people can be a bit sort of scared. But we do a full briefing and we explain exactly what we've just explained to you. So we've got a few examples. This is one of the first ever one, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the first ever one. We did it in Manchester in 2007, November of 2007. And this area of Manchester is actually really close to the city centre. So just off the image to the left, quite a lot of bars. And then at the back of the image you can't see again, there's another main street. But this is like a canal basin derelict car park area between the two.
And it's not very nicely lit, is it?
It's totally unlit. And during the day, all the local bands go down there to get their photographs taken because it's quite gritty and urban.
But it's a kind of prime site for being guerrilla'd. It's a good site to show what light
or
can
mugged.
do. Or mugged.
So every light you see in that image is from a torch, from a person holding a torch. You can see the scale of it there, the little dots.
People hiding in different places.
And that's a lot of what guerrilla lighting is about creating these amazing transformations from unlit to lit using sort of literally handheld torches. So it's all about the photography as well. The photography is really important because that's what you use to generate the conversations afterwards.
Now we did hear that you may be planning to do one yourselves, so we have some examples here.
Some inspiration.
This is another canal.
It is, yeah. Canals work
canals
well.
are good. So one of the things is that when someone's standing in position with a torch, they haven't got a clue what the building actually looks like. So it's very important that everyone comes back at the end and looks at the images together so that they understand what their contribution made or how the lighting worked together as a whole.
That's the beauty of sort of digital photography. We go out now and the photographer takes the shots, we come back to the base, everybody goes off and has a beer, and we put the photographs onto the laptop, and literally sort of within half an hour from coming back in, you can see how you've transformed a space. And as Sharon said, this person here can only see what he's doing, really can't see the big scene from the picture.
It wouldn't have worked years ago, would it?
It wouldn't.
Developing photos. So Martin said we sometimes use different props. So the mirror balls was one. We also use something called a pixel stick. We were discussing earlier and reckoned you'd all have one, but no.
Has anybody heard of a pixel stick?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. That's one.
So a pixel stick is the latest, I guess you would call it the latest generation of light painting.
In the picture we showed you of the multicoloured, the rainbow block of flats, there was a little rainbow in the corner, and several years before we bought this, we got a piece of wood and stuck a load of coloured LEDs in it, and it was like we didn't know a pixel stick was coming.
It was an early version of the pixel stick.
It was like a prototype pixel stick, but we didn't know this was coming. But it's just something we've used in the imagery. So here's a few more examples.
So this was, we did Guerilla Lighting as part of a light festival in Ghent, in Belgium, and literally we sort of grabbed about 40 people off the street that were wandering around, and we went and
because nobody turned up.
Nobody turned up to work with us. But on this site, it was an elementary school, so we decided we should go inside to create some life inside the school, and we used the spectrum or the rainbow as a sort of symbol of the kids playing in there.
I'm forever going to be annoyed because this window and this window are not right. I couldn't. It's very hard in like 5 minutes to get these things set up. You can see from like some of the sort of selections the kind of places we're choosing, sort of the kind of places that would benefit from, more creative or more interesting lighting.
Again, and so this was the first time we used mirror balls. We just wondered how it would work, what it would look like. So this is a road tunnel in Belgium, but in a place called
it's got the wrong title.
Which is just outside of
Liège.
That's right. So this road tunnel, all the red and the white lines, they're all from individual torches, and we've got 4 mirror balls on the floor, on the road in the middle, and the torches are bouncing off them, and they create these little rings of light. So the mirror on the mirror ball is actually reflecting the focal ring of the LED torches.
I just point out that the existing light is that. Literally that. So all sorts of places. This is a car park. Car parks need good lighting too. Picturesque
Finnish wooden huts.
These were from the video. Are they going automatically?
They are.
Yeah, it's kind of going crazy.
That's
right. So this is the pixel stick. So this was a church in London, and it was in November. So we have a Remembrance Day where everyone wears poppies. So it just gives us this opportunity sort of to create something quite magical and add to the images.
And this is on the same estate. This was as part of the Social Light Movement workshop. So we were there for a week, working with groups of students and the London School of Economics. And what they came up with was a series of different lighting concepts for different spaces. And we finished the week by doing a guerrilla lighting event where the residents came out and held the torches. We had groups of about 30 children running around with us. And this is the sort of housing that they live in, which is in what we call London stock brick, which is quite a yellowy brick, which is why we put the yellow light onto it. And then we sort of painted sunflowers with a pixel stick along the bottom of it.
Because we can. And
then, as Sharon said, before pixel stick.
We've included this example, and we didn't know that the designer for this piece would be in the audience. Is he still here? Is he hiding? This was several years ago, a guerrilla lighting event in Copenhagen, and it wasn't one that we were involved in other than to come along and watch and sort of be part of the evening. We quite like using this example because it's particularly creative.
The scale of ambition on this was massive. We were blown away.
These flowers, or lollipops,
And that person.
flowers, and this person were achieved, and this sort of little house here, these were achieved with people swinging glow sticks, and they had to swing them for a very long time for them to get this image.
Toilet roll.
Yeah, no, there were some long strips of white material that were rolled down the building in order to make this the person.
It was
There was a giant sun.
lit from the other side over.
We'd never seen anything like this. It was very, very different, very, very creative. And it happened to be in Copenhagen, so it was a good example. And then there's just 2 more images, which are actually from last week, as well as speaking at a conference in Romania. Because we were there, I think wherever we go, people take the opportunity to do some guerrilla lighting. And this is the first time it's happened in Romania. And they've bought their own set of torches, and we did five sites, and these are just 2 of the sites.
So as Sharon said, it's been done in sort of lots of different places around the world. Sometimes it involves us, sometimes it doesn't. But the main aim of this really is to create publicity and debate about light in the urban environment and about light pollution and waste, and also about who should do lighting design and how it's actually a real responsibility to be a lighting designer. You're using energy, you have an impact on people's health, you're sort of working in public spaces. So we sort of think that that's something that needs attention.
But it also gives all the participants an opportunity to learn a bit of language about lighting and lighting design and architecture that they may never have had any experience of before. It's also sort of mutated in various different workshops around the world. So using the format, this was in Singapore a good few years back, where all the students had their own sites, and they worked for a week testing it, and then at the end of the week sort of went out and did it guerrilla style.
And then I think, as Sharon said at the start, for us, it's happened in lots of places without us, but that was the aim. After a while of doing this, we realised that it was a really good way to spread the word about light. So we created a how-to guide. We effectively tried to make it open source. So if you want to do guerrilla lighting, there's an instruction set there on the website. We've got lists of the different type of equipment we use. We'll publish your pictures on our website and our Facebook group. And so we've really we've spread it as much as we can, I think. And it's still growing.
And also, we would go mad if we constantly had to do guerrilla lighting. So we
want other people to do it.
We need other people to do it, yeah. Okay, so if we were going to stick completely to time, we've got 30 seconds left, and we've got 1 slide left, so it's almost perfect.
Almost.
We're just going to tell you about this because we thought it might be useful to you as students. Several years ago, another manufacturer came to us and asked us if we wanted to be involved in a project, and we convinced them to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
This was a project with Philips, and they wanted to create an app, a photo-based app. And we worked with them.
They wanted to create an app, and then we came up with the idea of sharing inspiration and photographs.
So they funded this app, and it kind of died a sort of Philips death. They put gave it. They Philipsed it.
They spent a lot of money and then shuffled it away into a
decided they
drawer.
didn't want to use it anymore. So we've just taken it over from Philips. It's taken us a year because it's that difficult to deal with them. It's taken us a year to get the code and to get everything. But now it's back live. So the website's live and the app is now...
The app's live, but it's a bit buggy.
Bit slightly buggy. The website's better. Basically, it's lots and lots and lots of images about lighting, and the whole idea is a sort of shared community of lighting images for you to be able to use them and for you to share your pictures. We're hoping to sort of revive it in the next few months.
We're working on the code now. We're trying to revive it. We're going to build some events around it. It's a completely moderated environment, so there shouldn't be too many photographs of cats.
Or holiday shots, but they pop up.
Holiday by the pool there, so we're and what we've done is we've made it more collective than it was. We've invited 8 or 9 different lighting design practices around the world to share ownership of it with us. So we're running it as a joint resource. We're all going to promote it and moderate it and try and make it something that's really
good.
useful.
Yeah. Okay, we've gone 1 minute and 24 seconds over, so we're going to end there.
So, thank you very much.